a triple carb CD Stromberg here. I'm going to tune them up for you today and show you all the step-by-step of how to do it. This was just tuned actually by a carb specialist, so we're going to see how good his job is, and I can tell you right now that from what I've seen it's not too flash, and I'll show you what I found even before I even started the job, and I'll show you that right now. Okay, for a start, if you're going to synchronise carburettors, you want them all to work together. These ones are not working together. Grab the throttle, you can see the linkage moves. The linkages are all moving, but this carby here isn't even moving yet. The middle one's on, and the back one's not on. Open up a little bit further, then the second one comes on. The front one's still not even coming on. Very poor adjustments on the front and rear rods. Another thing, empty, no oil in the dash pots. They must have oil in there unless you've got a super high performance vehicle and you're doing circuit racing. Then you don't need oil in there because you want your dash pots to lift up really quickly. For a street car, you've got to have oil in there. Before I get stuck into this and show you how to do the triple carbs, I'm going to check the timing, ignition advance, have a look at the spark plugs, get a read of those, and just get a base knowledge of what this car's like and who set it up and how they've set it up, and then I can go from there and make an informed decision of how I'm going to set up the timing in relation with the carburetors. Ignition and carburetors have to work together, hand in hand. No good having a good set of carburetors if the ignition is stuffed up. So I'm going to look at both of them today, but basically in this lesson I'm only going to show you how to do the carbs. Let's go. Righto, I've gone through the ignition system on this, had a look at the spark plugs, and I'm not impressed. The ignition advance and centrifugal advance of the distributor was set way too light. What this means in reality is I can't set the timing with a conventional timing light because the advance has already started below the RPMs of this particular vehicle. I would estimate the advance in this is starting at around about 700 RPM or even earlier, which is great for a standard car because the standard car idles at 600, 650, and the advance should start above idle speed. Well, this little sucker with triple carbs and a bit of a wild cam in it will idle around about 8 to 900. The advance is already going, so when I tested this one, the advance was up near 16 degrees, which is way over. Makes it hard to kind of set the carburetors up because the advance is fluctuating backwards and forwards. So for that reason, I've already set the distributor advance to start probably around about 1,000. I haven't checked that yet. Next time I start it, we'll check it with a timing light and make sure that the timing's not fluctuating. But what we're going to do, we're going to take the tops off these carburetors. Now in a triple carburetor setup, every carburetor needs to be identical in every way. You need the jet set in the same position. You need the float level to be identical. You need the throttle butterflies to be identical. Everything has to be identical. Whatever one carbie's got in it, the other carbie has to have in it. When you set them up in that way, you'll get perfect fuel distribution, you'll get the smoothest idle you possibly can, and you'll get the right mixture. So I'm just going to check this guy's work. I've already checked the airflow through the carburetors, and I've used this great little gadget. It measures kilograms of air per hour going through each carburetor. I'll tell you what you shouldn't use though. You just pass me over that stethoscope there on the box there. Alright folks, if you see a bloke using one of these to synchronise your carburetors, take it somewhere else. I've never known anyone that can tune a set of triples using a stethoscope to listen to vacuum coming through the carburetor. It's just, you can't do it. Don't care how good you are, and if you reckon you can do it, I'd like to see it. Prove it to me that you can set up a triple carbs of one of these suckers. I'll give you some money for it, I'll pay for your time. I know you can't, it's crap, rubbish. You need an airflow meter, guys. Only way you can do it accurately. Sure, that'll get it close, but not close enough if you want the ultimate. Grab one of these. There are other styles. This is actually designed for a Weber, but it fits beautifully into a Stromy. Covers the hole up nicely. Put it in like that. Check the airflow. This isn't badly set up at idle. Remember, I've pointed out to you that the throttle linkages are really dodgy. The off idle, they're not synchronised at all. But at idle, they're not too bad. I've only got 1 kilogram per hour difference between each carburetor. That's not bad variation. I'm going to try and get it better, of course, see if I can. But what we're interested now in is checking that the float levels are correct and that every jet in each carburetor is set at the same height. So I'm going to skip the movie through it a little bit. I'm not going to show you all the tedious stuff of pulling this apart. So I'm going to get stuck into it, take the tops off these carburetors, and we'll come back to it. Alright folks, we're going to check the height of these jets. I'll put the vernier caliper in there and I'll close it down, and we'll see that it's, you probably won't be able to see it on camera, but it is 1.3 mil. Okay, we'll set up the second one. Alright, the second one is 1.78 mil. Bit of variation there. And the third one, if I'm not in the way of the camera there, is 1.82. So the jets aren't equal, are they? So what I'm going to do is now set them up all equally. Doesn't matter what I set them up to, as long as they're equal. Once we get the thing running, then we'll adjust them equally. Each carburetor is exactly the same as the other. Alrighty, I've adjusted all the jets on every carburetor, and what I've done here is I've screwed the jet right up until it's flush with the outer brass ring. The reason for this is when I put the pistons back in, I'm going to check that the jets are centralised. The only way to do this is to screw the jet right up until it's flush. You drop the plunger back in and you screw it all back together, and then you put your finger in through the throat of the carburetor, in through that hole there, and you pick each piston up and make sure that it returns back to the bottom with a thud. You'll hear the thud as I lift it up, and I'll show you that later. This tells you that the jet is centralised and the piston won't stick. At the moment I don't know if they are centralised, because looks can be deceiving, because looking at that it isn't central, but it very possibly is, but all we're doing is just checking it. After we check that, then I'll screw all the jets down approximately 1.5 to 2 turns each, and they all should be equal, and then we can start tuning this sucker up. Rightio, the thing you have to watch here when you're putting the pots back in is to make sure this little lug here goes into that little recess in the carburetor, and that the diaphragm is packed in all the way around this recess, no bit sticking out. You can't see from the angle the camera is at the moment, but right here it has been pinched from its last installation because it wasn't fitted correctly. It's still okay, it will seal, but you have to make sure that the rubber naturally sits in that groove all on its own. If you have to pack it in tight and twist it and pull it and make it fit, then your diaphragm needs to be replaced because it's obviously stretched from fuel contamination or oil contamination. So basically when you drop it in, it should almost fit in by itself. I've just replaced one of these diaphragms in the back carburetor because it was all expanded and didn't fit properly. And I just dropped the diaphragm straight in, and it went straight into its recess. There was no problems with it. I haven't replaced the diaphragms on these other two, that's why I'm sitting here and I have to pack them in a little bit. They're not badly stretched, there's no problem with them, but brand new ones should fit straight in. Okay, we're ready to put the top back on this little fella, and then I'll show you how to centralise the jet. And we'll put the top back on, screw it down. Now, important with one of these that you have all the screws torqued down evenly. You don't need a tension wrench, just by feel will do, because if you don't tighten them down evenly, you can kick the body and you'll have trouble centralising your jet. So we'll just screw these screws down, and then we'll show you how to do the jet. Alright, I've screwed all the screws down. From previously you saw that I screwed the jet right up till it was level. Now I'm lifting this piston up, and you can hear it clicking. Whoop, no clicking. The piston's stuck up, so we've got a bit of a problem. All we have to do is grab a 5/8" spanner, place it on the jet underneath the carburetor, loosen the jet, and then just keep picking the plunger up and down until it drops. Add a little bit of weight to it just to help it along, centralise it. You have to undo that nut sufficiently to allow the jet to move around, and all you do is just keep, oops, stuck again, just keep lifting it up and down, and gradually tighten that jet up. until you got it tight. Well, there she's jammed, so we'll back it off again. Sometimes you have to push the screwdriver down to force it down to get it into the jet. And then, oops, see it's grabbed there again. So we loosen it off. No good. This one's being a bit of a pain. Okay, and there you go, that's how you centralise your jet. Now all we have to do is, I've already turned all the other jets down exactly one turn, so I'll do the same with this, and our carburetors are basically synchronised, ready to start up. Well folks, I've just set this whole thing up. I've set all linkages so they're perfect. They all open up really well. As soon as one carb opens, the other two open with it. Synchronisation, as I said at the start, these weren't too bad. All I've had to do was adjust the centre carb up a little bit after doing all the linkages. And now I have got exactly 10.5 kilos passing through each carburetor at idle. Beautiful. Mate, I'm actually surprised at the result myself, because we started this thing and it started and idled straight away from my base setting. I haven't even touched it yet. I haven't done the mixtures yet. It's just running all by itself from a total static tune. The timing, I still have to adjust the centrifugal advance in the distributor a little bit. It is still wanting to advance too early, and you can tell that straight away. As soon as I rev it, it does take a little bit for it to come back to idle. So it's idling a little faster and it'll drop down. I'm very pleased with this so far. I've still got to do the mixtures, see if I can get it run a little bit better, but straight away the owner told me, wow, that sounds so much better. Mate, it's not hard to adjust triple stommies. All you got to do is have the right equipment, like one of these. Airflow meter, like I said before, stethoscope's useless. Every carburetor is identical, set up exactly the same. Whatever I do to one, I do to the other. Man, I'm happy as Larry with this. I think so's the owner. All I got to do is fix up the centrifugal advance a little bit better, tighten up the spring, and then I'll do the mixtures, and then we'll go for a run and see how it goes. The only concern I've got with this at the moment is the heat range of the spark plugs. If they're too cold, then we're not going to get proper combustion of the fuel. The plugs are going to soot up, and he's going to keep puffing out black smoke, which is one of his symptoms. Even now it is still blowing a little bit of smoke, but we really need to take this out for a bit of a thrashing, clear out the tailpipe and muffler of all the soot that's in there, and then see how it settles down. So I'll adjust the mixture shortly. I'll do that distributor so it helps me with my adjustments, and then I'll come back and we'll have a look at another look at it. Okay, I've done the centrifugal advance. Everything's good now. I rev it. It comes straight back to idle. The advance isn't holding it up at higher RPM. Now what I've got to do is do the mixtures. First of all, what I do is starve it for fuel. So whatever it's set at the moment, I will screw the mixture screw in, and I'll feel the engine RPM die. Once it dies, I know I'm too lean. So I take the screw back out again until I get my best idle. So all you're really doing is trying to get it to run at its highest RPM. Once it's running too high, you have to then back off each carburetor on the throttle linkages, which is set down here, which then means you have to rebalance them using the flow meter, make sure they're correct, and then you start the process again, adjusting the mixture into a lean, and it drops off an idle, adjust it out until you get your best idle. Once you've got your best idle and it's idling reasonably well, you turn it off and make sure the engine doesn't pre-ignite. In other words, doesn't keep running on. If it keeps running on, we've got it running too fast. Simple as that. We don't have fuel shut-off solenoids on these carburetors like they do in late model cars, so we've got to make sure that it doesn't run on when we switch it off, and all we do is we keep idling it down until we can switch it off and it stops. So let's do the mixtures. So I'm going to start off with the front one, and all I'm going to do is take it in 1/4 of a turn. Nothing. We'll do the second one. 1/4 of a turn. And then the third one. Okay. We wait a little bit. It doesn't seem to have made any much difference, so that's good. Give it a rev to stabilise. Let's do it again. Another 1/4 of a turn. Just watch your hands don't get burnt. Okay. Still seems to be running reasonably well. Alright, so now the jets are half a tune down compared to where they were when they were all the way at the top. And we're still screwing in. Okay, straight away. I could hear that made a difference. So I'm pretty much on the money right where I am now. So I'm going to leave it like that. Everything seems to be running pretty good. I reckon I could even idle it down a little bit. Might get a little bit rougher. We might do that. So whatever I do to one, I do to the other. So we might go 1/8 of a turn on each of these screws. Okay, it has gone a little bit rougher. Okay, now we want to make sure the throttle linkages aren't sticking, so we need to push up on each carburetor. Okay, it's made no difference, so they are coming back to their idles properly. I'm pretty happy with that. That sounds pretty good. Now what we'll do is we'll shut it down and we'll see if it keeps running. Alright, you want to shut it down? Beautiful. The engine doesn't run on, so we've got the idle speed right. It's a little bit rough on idle. Understandably, it has a stage 2 cam in it. I'm happy with that. That's pretty damn good. The only thing I really have to do now is just to resynchronize it. Remember, I did adjust back off the screws each, didn't I? So I need to run this back over it again, make sure that they're still flowing the same. I would imagine now they'd probably be flowing 10 kilograms an hour instead of 10.5. So yeah, we might go for a drive and see how that's all panned out.
Okay folks, here we are 15 years later, and I'm trying to get my very first video ever made up on YouTube. So I thought I'd add this little bit in because I have left a little bit out of that video that I think is important for you to know. Now, I carry on about uniformity. Each carburetor has to be the same. Well, that is 100% accurate when everything's on the bench, okay? But once you assemble it all and you put it on the car, you may find it to be a little bit different. Now, on the carburetor, I didn't mention that there's actually a mixture checking device, a little pin that you push underneath the carburetor, and that lifts the piston up a little bit, and you can actually check your mixture whether it's too lean, too rich, or spot on. Now, I didn't show you that at all, just forgot about it. So I'll cover that now, but I won't go into too much detail. Now, I did use that pin at the end of the test drive. I just quickly lifted the pins just to make sure the mixtures were correct. Now, why would you have to do that? Well, look, depending on the manifold you've got fitted, it could be an individual runner, it could be a crossover manifold. It may affect the mixtures of each carburetor to each cylinder, and there's lots of other variables too that can affect mixture adjustment individually on one carburetor compared to another. So you may have to deviate from the similarities that you set up on the bench. Now, by lifting that pin, you can actually check the mixture of that one carburetor going to the two cylinders. All right, and I won't cover what you have to do there. Somewhere on my website I've already got that covered in an article. But yeah, you can actually check your mixtures using that pin, and if you have to change one carburetor, then you change one carburetor to get the mixture even on that cylinder compared to the rest. So all the jets don't have to be all down the same distance, and as I said, lots of variables affect that. But on the bench, yeah, 100% true. Everything has to be uniform by the time you're ready to fit it to the car. So I thought I'd add that in, and let's watch the rest of the video and I'll get it up online.
Okay, well that's it. We've been for a drive, customer's happy, this car's running more smoothly. Not much more increase in power as we wouldn't expect, because all I've done is synchronise the carburettors. Basically the timing is exactly the same. All I've done is change the advance curve. It was advancing way too early and causing us problems at idle. So now that's fixed up, it's running a lot smoother. It fired up straight away after I did the preliminary strip the carburetors down from the top and synchronised the jets. Pretty basic stuff. I hope I've imparted some knowledge onto you that you feel confident that you could probably do something like this yourself. Unfortunately, you might not have a flow meter like I have. That makes it a little bit more difficult, but there are ways around that. You can do it other means. Like for instance, we could have backed off all the throttles till they were dead shut, screwed the screws down, and then screwed them all one turn each. The carbies have to be synchronised. Whether it idles too fast or too slow, you take it from there. But whatever you do to one throttle shaft, you do to the other throttle shafts, thereby keeping the carburetor synchronised. So you don't have to have an airflow meter. There are ways around it. I've got one, so I used it, just for the simplicity of the lesson. What else can we say about it? It's burning a little bit of oil, no big deal. It's coming up through the PCV valve, so it's blowing a little bit of blue smoke as we're travelling along. We've put oil into the dash pots, which made a big difference. Smoothed out the acceleration, makes it a lot smoother to accelerate off low RPM. We've synchronised the jets. All the jets were out all over the place, as you remember earlier on in the video. So we've made all the jets the same. We've made the throttle openings the same. We've put the same oil in every dash pot, same quantities. Everything's got to be the same. Whatever it is in one carby has to be in the other carby. And it runs like a dream. This is the way it should have been done the first time. And I think the guy paid $300 something. Yep, paid $300 to get a bloke to do this for him. And didn't get a very good job as far as I'm concerned. I don't even have all the gear. If I had an oscilloscope, I could have done a far, far better job on top of this. Because I don't know what the spark is doing. I can only check the timing and centrifugal advance. I don't know the duration of the spark. I know the dwell angle, for instance. I've got a dwell meter. So it's stuff that I can't check without an oscilloscope. But to me, it's running reasonably well. So, you know, today I got away with it without using the oscilloscope to diagnose it. It was all basically static. Just a few spanners, a flow meter, and that's basically all I had, and a test light, so I could do the timing, ignition timing, static, which is in another video, which is probably on my site somewhere. But today it was all about synchronising your carburetors, and there we've done it. It's I think I'm rather happy with that, with the result, and I think the customer's happy with the result, and I think I'll probably see him again down the track to do it again when they become unsynchronised, I guess. Eventually they will. All right, thank you.